好，testing，大家聽唔聽到？應該就冇問題嘅。OK，好，大家好，我係 Anna Kwok 郭鳳儀，我係 HKDC 嘅執行總監啦。咁非常歡迎大家今日嚟到 HKDC 嘅 YouTube channel 咧，係聽我哋咧去現場直播去講翻最近幾日之前香港政府對我發出咗嘅通緝令啦，同埋懸紅啦，同埋咧 HKDC 咧作為一個組織嘅反擊咧，就係今日公布呢一個我哋準備咗半年嘅研究報告嘅。咁首先一開始我哋會講咗呢一個懸紅啦，同埋通緝令先啦。咁呢一部分就會係用廣東話講啦。咁然後下半部分咧係講到我哋嘅報告嘅話咧，咁就會係用英文邀請我哋嘅研究員上嚟講嘅。咁但係想聽廣東話嘅朋友都唔緊要啦。我哋今晚咧會喺我哋個 YouTube channel 咧都會有另外一個本身錄起咗嘅廣東話嘅版本咧，係會詳盡同大家解釋翻究竟我哋呢一個報告咧係做啲乜嘢嘅，同埋咧本身個內容係啲咩嘅。咁事不宜遲啦，咁我就開始講翻我哋而家呢一刻面對緊嘅事情先啦。咁如果大家知道啦，就2日前咧香港政府啦同埋香港國安處啦，佢哋就出咗一個通緝令，就係通緝咗8位喺海外嘅香港社運啦同埋倡議人士啦。咁呢8個通緝令咧都包括我啦。咁喺通緝令之餘咧，香港政府都係第一次選擇咗係懸紅大家嘅。咁今次就係選擇咗每人懸紅100萬港元啦。咁值得一提嘅係咧，其實大家即刻翻查資料咧，都發現好多喺香港真係需要被通緝嘅一啲殺人犯啊、強姦犯啊等等咧，其實佢哋被通緝嘅嗰個數值咧係遠低於我哋嘅100萬嘅。咁呢一部分其實我覺得都非常彰顯到，其實香港政府佢對於佢自己施政上面嘅方針，同埋點樣維係所謂國家安全同社會安全咧，係有一個本末倒置嘅理解啦，同埋係完全咧同一個正常人去理解常識邏輯咧，係完全相違背啦，同埋係不合常理嘅。咁呢一方面啦，我就會見到其實喺國際社會咧，呢幾日咧一見到香港政府通緝我哋8個人，然後有晒8個人頭，仲要係香港身份證嗰張相出嚟之後咧，咁國際社會其實都係引起咗好多迴響啦。咁所以其實喺過去幾日，大家都會見到我哋8個啦，咁同埋其他喺海外嘅香港人啦、香港組織啦、甚至國際人權組織啦，其實咧都係就住呢一件事咧，不停咁樣去倡議啦，同埋咧用呢一個方法去講明。其實而家香港已經完全冇咗法治制度啦，都完全冇晒咧香港應該要擁有嘅言論自由。而延伸落去咧，就係香港政府佢過往呢1年嚟啦，其實佢都好努力咁樣去嘗試話自己係 back in business 啦，照常營業啦，甚至話自己咧係繼續係一個國際金融中心。而呢一點咧，正正就係我哋其他喺海外嘅香港人咧，好想反駁，同埋係而家用緊呢一個通緝令嘅例子咧，去反駁緊嘅一個力證嚟嘅。咁所以喺過去幾日啦，我係無論去到 BBC 啦、Reuters 啦、Al Jazeera 啦，唔同嘅外媒咧去做訪問嘅時候咧，我都係會去嘗試用呢一個例子去講明而家香港發生緊嘅事啦，同埋講明咧香港政府咧其實咧係唔應該繼續受到咧佢以往一直受到基於佢係國際金融中心嘅嗰一種特殊待遇嘅。咁呢一方面咧，都包括一啲我哋最近做緊嘅campaign 啦。咁就係我哋做緊一個叫做 Bar John Lee 嘅 campaign。咁呢一個 campaign 我哋係喺大概5月嘅時候開始啦。咁當時其實就係我去咗國會 CCC 嘅一個聽證會啦。咁喺聽證會上面咧，雖然聽證會佢係想探討一國兩制嘅衰退啦。咁但係實際上咧，我都係用咗聽證會去講明嚟緊11月咧，美國將會主辦呢一個 APEC 嘅 meeting 啦。咁 APEC 就係Asia Pacific Economic Coordination 嘅 meeting 啦。其實佢就係希望一啲亞洲、太平洋嘅國家咧，係可以咧一齊聚首一堂去講下大家經濟發展，咁然後睇下會唔會有嘢可以協調到咁樣。咁而香港咧，因為作為一個獨有嘅經濟體啦，咁所以咧喺過往嘅 APEC meeting 咧，其實香港咧都係有一個成員嘅席位啦，同埋係會受邀請出席嘅。咁但係今年咧，由於美國係主權國啦，而主辦國啦，而美國咧其實早喺2020年咧， 已經就係制裁咗李家超啦，係因為當時佢係喺2019年嘅時候咧，係保安局局長啦，咁同埋佢當時咧，大家都知道其實佢就係喺背後操縱啦，同埋容許啦，香港有一個極度誇張嘅警暴發生嘅。咁所以當時美國政府其實喺2020年咧係已經制裁咗李家超，而制裁嘅意思咧，除咗係話李家超佢唔可以用任何美國嘅銀行啊，跟住大家成日聽到啊用現金出糧啊呢類等等嘅方便之餘咧，其實佢都係唔可以踏足美國嘅。咁所以咧喺呢個前提下咧，美國本身個 default position 啊，係應該唔會俾李家超出席喺 APEC 嘅 meeting 啦。咁但係大家就會見到啦，過去幾個月咧，首先你會見到美國國務院啦，曾經咧係有發出過一個聲明啦，或者一個書面嘅回應咧，係同國會嗰方面嘅詢問咧，係講話佢哋咧係會希望咧 APEC 嘅成員國咧係可以出席APEC 嘅會議嘅。咁但係啦，呢一個咁樣嘅書面回應啦，當出咗街，然後俾媒體廣泛咁報導之後啦，咁我哋唔同嘅香港組織都即刻好大反應啦，同埋一啲國際人權組織，咁即刻咧好快咧，你就見到國務院咧，佢隔咗幾日咁又即刻出咗一個新嘅聲明，佢就話唔好意思，之前個聲明咧係唔小心錯誤地送咗去國會嘅。咁所以咧，而家佢哋個新嘅stance 咧，同埋新嘅聲明咧，就係話其實咧，李家超是否將會被邀請到 APEC meeting，同埋是否出現於 APEC meeting 咧，係未被決定嘅。咁就喺呢一個關頭上面啦，我哋就開展咗我哋嘅 bounties campaign 啦。咁就係希望可以向美國政府施壓，令到拜登總統知道咧，佢係唔可以俾李家超入嚟啦，都唔可以純粹因為話希望李家超離開 APEC 嘅會議，所以咧就有豁免咗李家超佢嘅制裁啦，然後容許佢入境嘅。咁所以就會見到喺上個月啦，咁我哋 HKDC 嘅工作咧，其中一樣咧都係發起咗最後有53個組織聯署嘅一個公開信啦。咁就係咧主動去同拜登總統要求李家超唔可以入境啦，同埋咧美國政府咧係唔可以邀請李家超嚟 APEC meeting 嘅。咁但係喺過去幾個月都會見到啦，即使我哋公民社會呢一方面咧係有好多唔同嘅迴響啦。咁政府佢嘅喉舌咧，香港政府嘅喉舌咧係冇停過嘅。咁包括例如佢哋會不停咁樣喺佢哋自己嘅一啲傳媒方面啦，去講好多李家超係應該要嚟 APEC meeting 啊，呢一樣嘢係對美國同埋香港雙方嘅關係好啊。咁但係其實佢哋一直最大咁樣講嘅基石咧，都係基於佢哋會繼續講話香港而家照常營業，香港係一個國際金融中心。咁喺呢一個點上面咧，就係點解對外國嘅倡議者嚟講咧，係好重要地係需要同各國政府講明香港唔再係一個國際金融中心，而冇咗一個完善嘅法律機制之下咧，其實國際金融中心呢樣嘢係唔存在嘅。咁所以喺呢一個位啦，喺過去幾日啦，我去嘗試講啲傳媒去問我，究竟你點睇你嘅通緝令啊？你點睇你嘅懸紅嘅時候咧，我都係會盡量講咧，最緊要咧，其實係國際需要認同同埋知道同埋認清，而家香港已經唔再係一個國際金融中心啦。而佢嗰種國安法咧，喺域外執行啊，同埋喺域外應用嘅荒謬咧，其實咧都係需要去到一個程度，係我國政府需要認清呢一個荒謬嘅事實，係代表緊香港唔再係一個好嘅營商嘅 partner 啦。咁而李家超咧都係因此咧唔應該被容許入到去美國境內，而更加咧係唔應該咧去豁免佢嘅制裁嘅。咁所以咧喺過去幾日暫時我哋都係去繼續講緊 bounties 呢個 campaign 啦。咁但係除此之外啦，即係有陣時可能有啲傳媒都會問我究竟點解我覺得今次我會被納入個名單入面咧？咁始終可能我對比於喺名單上面嘅其他人，喺以往都未必係一個最高調地做好多倡議工作嘅人啦。即係雖然我喺美國都有一直去做 HKDC 嘅工作，而 HKDC 都係做咗好多喺美國倡議嘅工作啦。咁喺呢一個位上面，即係我自己嘅回應咧，都係認為因為喺5月嘅時候啦，有一個國會嘅聽證會啦。咁喺國會聽證會入面咧，我都係有去倡議美國政府啦，同埋美國國會做幾多行動嘅。咁第一就係頭先有講過話，唔可以俾李家超入嚟美國去參與 APEC meeting 啦。咁但係另一樣好緊要嘅咧，就係制裁香港國安法嘅法官同埋檢控官。 呢一個制裁嘅訴求咧，其實喺過去一段時間啦，都係由美國唔同嘅倡議組織咧，係一直有進行緊同埋去努力緊嘅，即係包括 HKDC 啦、Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong 啦、Hong Kong Watch 啦，等等等等，Stand with Hong Kong 啦，好多唔同嘅組織其實一直都係倡議緊呢件事。咁但係純粹咧，就係因為我喺聽證會嗰度講咗出嚟之後啦，其實之後都已經見到一啲黨媒啊、大公民會啊等等咧，係即刻捉住呢一個點咧，係咁嚟打嘅。雖然其實我喺成個聽證會呢一部分可能淨係佔好少嘅部分，但係佢哋已經 disproportionately 咁樣不停咁樣捉住呢件事嚟講啦。咁喺呢一個位上面都可以睇到咧，其實雖然香港政府啦，包括李家超在內啦，周圍就同人口講話啊，其實佢唔介意制裁啊，佢覺得制裁對佢都冇乜問題啊，淨係令佢更加俾心機做嘢啊，等等等等。但係其實佢哋都非常之清楚，美國同埋其他國家對香港嘅制裁咧，係對香港政府有一個無法挽回嘅創傷嘅。咁同埋呢一樣嘢咧，佢哋都係無論點樣加把勁咧，都係掹唔翻，就係個制裁喺度就喺度，生效就生效。佢入唔到嚟呢啲國家咧，其實佢一直咧都係好難做佢哋希望可以做到嘅外交啦，同埋希望可以做到嘅經濟嘅合作嘅。咁所以喺呢個位上面啦，即係我都係想再同大家講，就係而家喺美國嘅倡議組織咧，都係會繼續要求美國當局咧去制裁呢啲香港國安法嘅法官啦，同埋檢控官啦。咁呢樣嘢咧係絕對唔會停止嘅。咁同埋就係香港政府過去幾日其實都俾咗更加多嘅彈藥我哋去講呢一件事情啦。咁所以都希望美國當局咧，佢係可以盡快啦，即係聽到呢一啲意見啦。咁然後咧都係會配合咧去制裁到香港呢一部分嘅法官同埋檢控官嘅。咁而 HKDC 咧，即係喺呢一個其實都唔止48個鐘啦。我諗嚟到而家可能都50幾個鐘、60個鐘之前發出嘅通緝令之後啦。咁我哋團隊內部咧，其實都即刻去諗下啊，我哋除咗出咗早前嘅一個聲明之外，我哋有冇一啲反擊咧？咁因為係我哋好想彰顯到俾香港政府聽，我哋並唔害怕白色恐怖。而雖然喺呢一個情況下咧，所有唔同嘅人咧，可能都會有佢嘅擔憂，擔心自己嘅安全啊，等等等等。但係並唔代表我哋因此就要需要停止我哋嘅工作。咁就係因為咁樣咧，我哋就決定咧，將一個我哋本身已經準備咗過半年嘅一個研究報告咧，就變做喺呢一個關頭，就係今日嗰度公佈啦。咁一陣間咧，我嘅同事會一齊去講下呢個研究報告係咩。咁但係我可能都好簡單咁樣去講一講呢個研究報告佢背後嗰個因由係咩先啊？咁點解呢個研究報告會產生咧？首先講咗先，咁就係其實咧喺上年嘅時候啦，咁咧喺美國嘅一啲唔同嘅組織啦，或者唔同嘅倡議者啦，其實咧都開始咗做一系列嘅活動啦，就係咧追住呢一個喺美國嘅香港經貿辦嚟打嘅。咁而家呢一刻喺美國咧係有3個香港經貿辦啦，一個係喺華盛頓啦，一個喺紐約啦，一個喺三藩市啦。咁而呢3個經貿辦咧，佢其實都係喺港英政府嘅時候已經係建立咗㗎啦。咁其實佢某程度上其實佢係港英政府嗰陣時遺留落嚟嘅產物。咁但係喺主權移交之後啦，香港政府咧就繼續去沿用呢一個 HKETO 嘅 office 啦，同埋佢個 model 啦，咁就係繼續佢哋喺美國嘅一啲工作啦。咁而呢一啲香港經貿辦咧，佢一開始成立嘅時候咧，本身咧係理應咧係為咗建立一個比較好嘅商貿關係啦，就係喺美國同香港之間建立比較好嘅貿易關係而成立嘅。咁所以即係佢個名都有講明係經濟及貿易啦。咁所以佢咧其實個工作咧，個範圍咧理應就係喺經濟同埋貿易之間。咁但係咧，如果大家記得嘅時候啦，例如喺2019年咧，當美國嘅香港人喺度嘗試倡議緊Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act， 就係香港民主及人權法案嘅時候咧，咁其實當時都有一啲唔同嘅媒體咧係有揭露香港政府係有派佢唔同嘅人咧係喺美國嘅華府嗰度咧就 counter lobby， 就係希望呢條法案唔好通過嘅。咁但係佢雖然有香港經貿辦啦，咁但係因為香港經貿辦喺美國屬於嗰個界別咧，其實係唔可以直接做一啲叫做 lobbying 游說嘅工作。咁但係咧佢哋都係 因為由於身處華府咧，其實佢哋咧都係有一個地理上嘅優勢，係比較容易去 reach out to 一啲喺華府其他可以涉及同埋可以干預或者可以影響政策嘅人。而佢哋係唔一定係需要去真係做一個好直接嘅游說嘅行動，都已經可以影響到一啲政策嘅。咁當時咧就係香港政府有利用一啲有利用喺度嘅香港經貿辦做一啲咁樣嘅操作啦。咁但係喺2019年嗰個運動之後咧，其實大家都冇話有人特別再去留意啦。咁當然啦，即係香港都經歷咗好多事情啦。咁所以大家當時可能都仲係喺度留意緊國安法比較多。咁但係咧就暫時咧一直都係未有一個比較完善嘅資料庫啦，去講明其實究竟香港經貿辦過去幾年做啲咩嘅。咁但係就係正正上年有一啲倡議者咧，佢哋開始咗做 HKETO 嘅一啲活動之後咧，咁我哋 HKDC 去諗我哋有啲咩可以做嘅時候，我哋都會即刻諗，其實 HKDC 其中一個強項啦，就係做研究報告啦。咁例如我哋之前做過政治犯嘅研究報告啊，或者係做呢一個美國嘅企業、國際企業喺香港營商時候有冇做白手套嘅呢啲研究報告咧，其實喺過去咧都係得到好多外媒啦，甚至國會辦公室啦，甚至係白宮咧嘅留意嘅。咁而好多位啦，其實或者好多資訊啦，其他人可能未咁容易去揾到嘅時候，其實 HKDC 咧都係有一個比較龐大嘅網絡，係可以支援到我哋做呢啲事情。咁所以咧就令我哋咧諗到呢一個念頭啦，就係既然大家都係想去打呢一個香港經貿辦嘅話，咁 HKDC 嘅角色就係可以喺呢一件事上面咧嘗試去做研究調查啦。咁所以咧就係當時我哋嘅同事啦 Mason 啦，咁佢一陣間會嚟分享啦，就去諗咗成個研究嘅方向啦，同埋究竟我哋可以用啲咩方法去刮到晒香港政府喺過去咁多年嚟一段時間啦，喺美國本地做過嘅一啲政治游說啦，同埋政治活動啦，咁就係其實咧係嘗試緊干涉美國嘅政治同埋內政嘅。咁呢一個位我係覺得有一個ironic 啦，或者有一個有趣或者好笑，甚至係詼諧嘅地方啦。咁就係因為幾日前啦，其實香港政府佢通緝我嗰個案件咧。佢係用呢一個勾結外國勢力嗰條罪啦，去話我嘅。咁但係個問題係咧，如果你翻查資料咧，你會見到咧，香港政府咧係非常之努力咁樣咧，其實係想 reach out to 外國勢力啦，同埋係非常之努力咁樣咧，希望可以同所謂外國勢力咧係有唔同方面嘅合作啦，同埋得到佢哋嘅支持。咁所以呢一個位就係佢搞笑嗰個位啦。咁當然同時啦，即係呢個係香港政府，佢都係會同一啲喺香港嘅支持者啦，或者甚至中國嘅一啲支持者，即係一啲藍絲、小粉紅等等，同佢哋講個古仔就係話呢一班漢奸嚟嘅，佢哋就成日勾結外國勢力，但係佢哋唔講嘅嘢咧，就正正係其實佢哋自己咧都係經常干涉其他國家嘅內政啦，同埋咧係希望咧，可以有外國嘅一啲唔同嘅國家咧，係支持佢哋啦，同埋援助佢哋嘅工作。咁所以就係點解我哋會希望喺而家呢一刻咧，就係公布呢一個報告啦，同埋報告嘅內容啦，就係為咗咧去證明咧，其實香港政府咧，佢一直咧都係有做呢一啲操作啦，咁係作為一個最強嘅反擊啦。咁同埋咧，除此之外咧，有一樣嘢，即係都想同大家分享，咁就係喺近幾年啦，喺外國啦，無論係外媒啦，一啲外國嘅智庫啦，甚至喺國會入面咧。一個新嘅 topic 叫做 transnational repression 咧，都係得到更加多嘅關注。咁 transnational repression 中文就可以解作跨境嘅鎮壓啦。咁個意思咧，其實就係話一啲極權嘅國家啦，佢哋咧就除咗喺佢哋自己嘅國土上面咧鎮壓一啲人嘅人權同埋自由之外咧，佢哋都係會嘗試用唔同嘅方法咧。鎮壓埋一啲已經唔喺佢國土上面嘅人嘅安全啦、自由啦同埋人權嘅。咁而最近呢一個通緝令，其實正正就係印證咗呢一種 transnational repression 嘅 tendency 啦，或者趨勢或者走向啦。咁而同時咧，我哋呢一個研究報告咧，其中一樣想講嘅嘢咧，都係咧，其實香港政府。 咁而呢一種通緝我哋係一種啦，咁但係佢喺外國游說，而喺外國嘅游說仲要係逆向游說咧，即係另外一種，因為佢嘅所謂逆向游說其實就係去反對任何關於香港民主同埋人權嘅法案通過。咁呢啲等等啦，都係香港政府暫時做過嘅惡行啦。咁國際社會咧係應該要知道啦，同埋國際政府咧，美國政府、英國政府、加拿大政府等等，同埋澳洲政府咧，佢哋都係好需要知道香港政府呢一種咁大無私樣嘅干涉啦，同埋行為嘅。咁因為咧呢啲香港政府最近都係非常之希望同呢啲唔同各國政府建交啦，即係建立翻一個好啲嘅關係啦。咁然後就氹佢哋話啊，我哋已經係照常營業啦，我哋繼續係國際金融中心，大家千祈唔好對香港失去失望。咁但係呢一個位就係我哋需要反駁佢呢個言論，同埋需要俾外國政府知道香港政府係唔可以信任嘅。咁同埋香港咧，其實已經唔係一個國際金融中心。咁所以就係有我哋今日嘅呢一個報告啦。咁可能喺呢一個位啦，咁我就可以開始介紹我嘅同事啦。咁佢就係我哋嘅研究員啦。咁again，我哋而家呢一部分咧，咁可能就會係用英文去繼續講先。咁如果大家想聽廣東話方面咧，係點樣去講呢一個新嘅報告嘅話咧，咁係可以留意我哋嘅 YouTube channel 啦，我哋而家用緊嘅呢個 YouTube channel 啦。今晚咧就會開始出幾個影片啦。咁呢幾條影片咧，都係會關於我哋而家講緊嘅呢個報告啦，咁同埋Mason 咧喺背後做過關於呢一個報告嘅一啲工作嘅一啲難題啦，同埋趣事嘅。好，咁我介紹下 Mason 先啦，好快咁。咁 Mason Wong 啦，黃樂之啦，咁佢就係喺上年咧參與咗 HKDC 嘅團隊啦，咁佢就係我哋嘅 Research Associate 啦，即係我哋嘅研究員啦。而佢過去咧都係有喺華府嘅一啲唔同嘅智庫啊嗰度工作過嘅，咁所以咧佢就對於點樣去做一個有效嘅政策報告咧係比較有經驗啦，同埋比較有知識啦。咁呢個都係點解我哋嘅團隊咧就喺當時就好開心，即係 Mason 加入咗我哋啦。咁同埋之後咧見到佢每次工作時候咧即係有嘅表現啦，或者呢啲報告咧都係覺得即係做得非常之好，同埋非常中 point 嘅。咁所以係啦，咁可能我哋都而家係咁 Mason 睇下你想唔想自己好快咁介紹一下自己先。
Hi everyone, I'm Mason. I'm the research associate here at Hong Kong Democracy Council. Thank you to Anna for the introduction, and I'll just be talking a little bit about our new report, Counter Lobby Confidential, today. And for Cantonese-speaking friends, there'll be an interview with me in Cantonese that comes out at around 7 p.m. tonight. So thank you all for listening into Alive.
Yep, thank you, Mason. So I think the first question that I'm going to ask you is just to ask about how the idea came about, surrounding this entire project. Because as I said earlier, there was this general direction that we should do something about the HKDTOs. But I think as we started to entertain this idea, we realized there were actually more bits and pieces to the entire global influence operation than we first expected or thought. So if you can walk us through kind of, the trajectory or the process for you to really go through this 6 months of work and how it resulted into this report in the end.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And so, as Anna has mentioned earlier, we had been looking at the presence of the HKDTOs in the United States because they're in sort of a strange diplomatic position. They're not really consulates, they don't provide consular services or really any services to Hong Kongers, but they are sort of representative offices of the Hong Kong government. And at the same time, a lot of Hong Kong activists in the United States had been looking at HKDTO partnerships with civil society organizations. And there had been journalistic organizations like the Hong Kong Free Press, which had reported on HKDTO-backed campaigns to lobby members of Congress. And so I think when we started thinking about looking at this issue, we wanted to have a more comprehensive look at actually what is the Hong Kong government's influence in the United States. How does this relate to a lot of issues that we talk about now in Washington or in the Hong Kong community about transnational repression, about foreign influence, of things of this nature? And so that's how this report ended up coming out. And we just kept, as we looked, we found more and more. And that's at the end of this 6-month process, we've ended up with this report.
Right. So, do you want to share a bit about how extensive the SAR government's lobbying campaign really is? I think that is something people can't really expect because, as I said, or as you said earlier, when we started out, we did not expect it to be this extensive at all. So, if you can share a bit about the extensiveness and also the expenses they had and the kind of meetings they've had, that would also help provide a perspective for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the resources that accompanies our report is the SAR Government Lobbying Influence Database, which documents from January 1st, 2014 until 2019, through 2019 and until today, what the interactions between HKETO directed lobbyists and US government officials or members of Congress or congressional staff or even media organizations, think tanks, state governments are. And so as you can see, there's a wide range of individuals that have been contacted by Hong Kong government-funded lobbyists. And in total, our database records over 1,000 interactions with American government officials, Congress members, congressional staffers. And we find this highly concerning, I think, because the scope of these activities have not really been revealed in the United States. And spending has skyrocketed. Political spending from pro-SAR government groups has skyrocketed since 2019. I think a lot of people have looked at Hong Kong and thought that, since there are not protests in the streets anymore, then, we don't have to worry as much about what is happening here. But this isn't true. Just since 2019, the Hong Kong government has spent $35 million, or Hong Kong government affiliated groups or pro-SAR government groups have spent $35 million on political spending. And I think that not just the United States government, but members of American civil society should absolutely be concerned about this as a matter of foreign influence and as a matter of foreign authoritarian governments attempting to influence American politics and civil society.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's also worthy to note that for our audience, to note that this kind of influence campaigns or actions happen both on the federal and the state levels. And the kind of audience that they have been reaching out to are very wide ranging, and they really come from different backgrounds, different groups, and that's the kind of influence campaign they have, which is a comprehensive strategy to really back all the support they can get. So Mason, I also wonder, so can you elaborate a bit on the kind of people that are lobbying for HKETO? I think that is also useful to understand the kind of Beltway insiders that are at play here, because a lot of times, of course, we see some Hong Kong legislators, pro-government legislators, of course, or pro-Beijing Hong Kong political party coming to the US or to DC to visit certain offices. And of course, we would laugh about it, right? Because we think, oh, nobody is going to meet them. And even when I know that some offices or some people are meeting them, these people are meeting them with the intention to talk about human rights and to tell them about the urgent need for the Hong Kong government to really highlight the human rights situation and to do something about it. But then I think what we miss is that even though there are these clowns visiting DC and they are obviously not achieving anything, there's still a number of Beltway insiders who are doing the dirty work and who are doing the Hong Kong government's bidding, and they are the ones who can potentially make some changes. So if you can share a bit about this kind of people, their backgrounds, where they come from, and how that works, it will also be helpful to paint that picture and network.
Absolutely. So I think one thing that we really need to note here is that while the people advocating for Hong Kong human rights, the democratic movement in general, tend to be activists, tend to be people from NGOs, tend to be people from global human rights groups and things like that, the people who are advocating on behalf of the SAR government are essentially uniformly very well-connected, wealthy, and powerful DC insiders, many of them former members of Congress or former American government officials from both parties. For example, currently Lamar Smith, who used to be chair of the House Science Committee and House Foreign Affairs, House Judiciary, is a lobbyist for the Hong Kong government. Ileana Ross-Lehtinen, who was Foreign Affairs chair, is a lobbyist for the Hong Kong government through the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. There are Democratic lawmakers as well. Bart Stupak from Michigan, who was very pivotal in the negotiations over Obamacare, was a key lobbyist opposing the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. There's a former Assistant Secretary of State. There are people who are very well connected on political campaigns. For example, Tony Podesta's lobbying firm, Podesta Group, which is very well connected within the Democratic Party, has been hired or had been hired before it was defunct by the Hong Kong government. And so I think there is a wide-ranging bipartisan network of well-connected elites that are advocating for the Hong Kong government and by extension, the CCP's interests on American soil. And I think this is frankly just unconscionable in terms of the types of things that these people are advocating for against the Human Rights and Democracy Act or against various efforts by Hong Kong human rights activists or democracy activists to fight for their own country. So I think this is really worth noting that these are not sort of random hired guns. They are the most connected DC insiders imaginable.
Right. And I also wonder, so what kind of things or what kind of topics did they talk about when they do go into these meetings? Because as you said, they would lobby against the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. But then what else when the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, is not a topic anymore?
Yeah, so we've gotten all this data from the public disclosures that foreign lobbyists are required to file. And so as part of these filing requirements, they do have to disclose in a very general and vague sense the topic of the meeting. So very often they're trying to look at things like comprehensive China legislation, or we can see from the contracts signed between Hong Kong government affiliated entities and these lobbyists that, for example, they are very concerned with US trade policy towards China. There are some lobbying firms that have signed contracts that say their explicit goal is to stop the US from taking action against Hong Kong's largest trading partners, which obviously includes mainland China. And so we've seen them meet with members of the House and Senate Foreign Affairs committees to ask about the status of things like the China Omnibus Bill or comprehensive China legislation. They're also very concerned with the status of US-Hong Kong trade relations, including at the state level. They've met with governors of both parties, for example, Jay Inslee, who's a Democrat who ran for president, and Ron DeSantis as well. They've met with these governors' offices to talk about US-Hong Kong trade relations at the state level. So you can see they have a lot of asks in terms of specific policy demands. And then these trade issues, I think, will become more important as people start to scrutinize the increasingly non-independent Hong Kong status in the World Trade Organization and things like this. So I think this remains a very serious issue in terms of the meetings that they are taking and the new lobbyists they have brought on. There's a whole stable of new lobbyists that they have brought on recently to work on these sort of trade advisory and regulatory issues. And so as the United States government is considering things like outbound investment screening and further export controls on things like semiconductors, further enforcement of sanctions on Russia through programs like CATSA, things like that, I think the Hong Kong government is only going to continue to step up its lobbying spending in order to combat these initiatives.
Right. So you mentioned that you were able to find these information through the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which I wonder if you can explain and elaborate more, because to my understanding, HAETO, the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Offices here in the US, are not considered foreign agents given their stance. But then we all know that HAETOs are somehow, involved in this process of the Hong Kong government trying to counter lobby and counter advocate for the bills or for different actions that we have been advocating for. So if you can elaborate more about, this fast network that they have, and also how the FARA really worked with this network to help you uncover some of the documents.
Yeah, so I think this relation is not well understood in the United States in a lot of ways. So the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which I think has been in the news quite a bit in the last number of years because of investigations related to Russian foreign agents in the United States, Paul Manafort and things like this, is a law that requires people who are lobbying for typically foreign government or government affiliate organizations, certain foreign companies or foreign political parties, to register as what is called a foreign agent in the United States. And so then the foreign organization for which they are lobbying or legally representing or whatever is listed as what's called a foreign principal. So the foreign agents that are working for the Hong Kong government are actually not working for HKETO, which is not registered under FARA. They're working for what's called the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, which is actually a statutory body of the Hong Kong government, but is typically sort of perceived to be something like the Chamber of Commerce or a sort of trade and business focused organization that does things like promote Hong Kong companies and whatnot. But you can see in the contract signed between the Trade Development Council and lobbyists that these contracts explicitly state that the lobbyists will be directed and instructed, and they will take orders from not HKTDC, not the Trade Development Council, but from HKETO itself. So you can see very clearly, unambiguously, that these lobbyists are representing the Hong Kong government's political interests. And very often they will bring HKETO officials to meetings and things of this nature. And so this network is a little bit tricky to navigate because they're using essentially the facade of the HKTDC to do the Hong Kong government's bidding. This is what we would call Baxaotou or white glove in Chinese. This is a proxy organization, is what we're alleging. So in terms of this network, the HKTDC, for every single one of the more than 1,000 interactions between American congresspeople, congressional staffers, government officials, is the foreign principal for the lobbyists who are foreign agents, even though they are always directed by HKETO.
Right. I still remember when you told us about, this entire network of how the HKETO, HKTDC, and Hong Kong government work together. Everyone was in shock because all this time, a lot of advocates and activists and even congressional offices have been focusing on only the Hong Kong Economic and Trade offices because the HKETOs are really the loudest and most obvious when it comes to trying to create this new image for Hong Kong and trying to, spread this sort of propaganda for Hong Kong's facade of business as usual. So it was very unexpected for us to find out, HKTDC is actually involved in all these and how they have worked so seamlessly together to really create the sort of very, very effective network they have now to meet with a wide range of actors in DC for foreign policy and for domestic policies in the US. I also wonder, so I think for the audience's knowledge, HKDC has been working with other advocacy organizations in promoting a legislation called the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office Certification Act. So essentially what that bill does, which is a bipartisan bill now, which that bill does is to ask the President Biden or the president at the time to evaluate HKETO's current standing every 6 months. And if the president decides that HKETO does deserve the kind of standing it has right now, then, there will just be another check or another evaluation, 6 months later. But every single time when there's, a sort of determination on whether the HKETO warrants the kind of privileges or standing it has, the president has to submit a report to the Congress as well. But in the case that if the President Biden or if the president decides HKETO does not warrant the kind of privilege it has, then HKETO must leave the US and terminate all its operation within, if I remember correctly, it would be 30 or 60 days or 6 months. Yeah. But on the other hand, if the president decides HKETO does deserve the kind of standing it has, then the decision will be deferred to Congress, and the members of Congress would have the decision-making power to decide whether the HKETO deserves to stay in the US. And of course, if they decide the HKETO should not stay, then again, the officers would have to leave the US almost immediately. So there's this sort of legislation out there that is trying to help create a system or mechanisms to evaluate and to review the work of the HKETO, the legitimacy of the HKETOs, especially after one country, two systems is essentially gone in Hong Kong. And with one country, two systems gone, and with HKETOs, being having a space all around the world, what that means is basically that now the Chinese Communist Party and China actually have extra foreign offices they can use as their proxies and as their basis for more foreign intervention and more infiltration. So that is the reason why we have been advocating for the Certification Act, as well as doing this sort of research report to really uncover the actual work and the actual functionality of these offices. But I do want to share with the audience that sometimes when we are advocating for these sort of bills or this sort of initiatives, we do come across an issue of some people being concerned about the possibility of actually riling up anti-Asian hatred. And that is definitely something that we are very concerned about, as well as we are Asians in the United States, and Mason being an Asian American born and raised here in the United States. So on this note, I do want to ask Mason, what are your thoughts about these kind of opinions, and what do you respond to this sort of concerns?
Yeah, I'm obviously very concerned about these issues as well. And my view on this is that we need to take the anti-Asian hate issue very seriously. But at the same time, we also need to take this issue of transnational repression and of foreign influence in the United States seriously as well. And I think past efforts to root out CCP influence in the United States, for example, in our report, we mentioned the China Initiative cases brought at American universities have garnered a lot of negative attention for being overbroad or ineffective, or there are very serious and credible accusations of racial profiling. We think that the best solution to this is to look for a targeted search of what we do already know, which is to have congressional investigations into the kinds of lobbyists who are representing HKETO and its like, who are essentially uniformly Americans, well-connected Americans born and raised here, who are well-connected Washington insiders. We think this is an area in which we can look at foreign influence very seriously without targeting Asian Americans or being overbroad in our search. And I think the language we're using is important as well, that we're not just sort of randomly roving and searching for sort of Chinese influence or something. We are saying in this report very clearly, we have lobbyists who are Americans. They are former members of Congress. They are former State Department officials, former campaign officials on important politicians' campaigns. They are named in our database. Their resumes are on our database. Their filings as foreign agents on our database. We want these people hauled before Congress to answer for what they're doing. We want there to be civil society pressure on these lobbying firms to make sure that they pay a reputational cost for representing the CCP and the Hong Kong SAR government. So we want this attention focused on elite Washington insiders who are doing these types of things, where we know for a fact that they are vectors of foreign influence. I think this would help and targeting these types of things rather than sort of just flaming up rhetoric about Chinese influence or Chinese infiltration or a society-wide threat or something. I think this more targeted approach would be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I think having been, advocating for Hong Kong and DC, I do realize that it's important to have enough perspectives, actually a basket of different perspectives for people to choose from, because it's never beneficial to only have one way of looking at things. It's often good to have, different approaches and different rhetorics. And at the same time, we're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party, who has, a bucket of tricks in their in their sleeves, and they can freely choose, what trick they want to use today. And it's up to us to kind of reveal and present that sort of comprehensive strategies that they have been using when they're doing United Front work. So, talking about that, Mason, we have spoken a lot about the lobbying work and the kind of legislative actions they have been trying to influence or trying to change. But what about their actions in terms of civil society work? Do they actually do any civil society engagement, or do they also do other kind of operations that are not directly related to lobbying but still have an impact on the kind of work we're doing?
Yes, they absolutely do. And actually, when you asked earlier a while ago about the genesis of this report, one of the things that had gotten our attention about HKETO is the number of cultural and civil society events that they sponsor in the United States, including with very prestigious and publicly affiliated institutions like the Smithsonian, the National Museum of Asian Art, the Renwick Gallery, and things like this. And so, for example, very often these events are going to be sort of disguised as cultural events. Like it'll be an event a number of HKDC members were at protesting was a Lunar New Year celebration at the Renwick Gallery, which was also sort of twisted into a celebration of the handover of Hong Kong to the CCP. And I think this is one of those things where, they're trying to bait people in with a sort of cultural activity and then give it a very narrow political meaning. So there have been Hong Konger organization campaigns against these types of events in general. There's been a quite successful campaign that has gotten a museum to cut off its relations with HKETO, which I think the Hong Kong community can be very proud of. And there remains a lot of work to be done, though. So another issue we've noticed is HKETO officials going to recruit Americans for employment in Hong Kong at elite American universities. For example, one HKETO official has gone to, I believe, Columbia and said that Hong Kong has, and I have the quote here, a robust legal system and an independent judiciary which upholds the rule of law, and there are fair and transparent legal proceedings, and there's a good environment for businesses to operate without interference, and there's efficient and transparent government services. And I don't need to tell you all, you've seen these ridiculous indictments that have come down. That's obviously not true. And I think these are obvious propaganda attempts related to things like John Lee's Hello Hong Kong campaign that are trying to lure foreign talent to Hong Kong, where, for all we know, if these people engage in political activities, they will be under risk as well. So I think this is a type of thing that is misleading Americans. And I think that this is advancing a foreign government propaganda operation in the United States. And in the way that a lot of civil society organizations have been against, say, museum partnerships with foreign dictatorships, or on campus against career recruiting from unethical organizations. I think there should be a lot more attention focused onto this type of civil society influence as well. And again, we can be quite targeted in this. We're not asking to look randomly for these things. We have very clear documented instances of financial partnerships between the HKETO and American civil society organizations, or between HKETO and the career services offices of universities. And we're asking that civil society organizations work hard to end these connections as soon as possible.
Right. Thank you so much for really laying out the kind of different approaches they have when it comes to the operations, the foreign influence operations they have been doing. So for audience, we have 5 to 10 minutes to take questions you may have. So feel free to utilize the chat box on YouTube and see if there are any things that stand out that you would like to know. And again, Mason has really done a great job on compiling all the data, taking out everything, and really shaping this important narrative and shaping this important rhetoric that we will be surely using for the HKETO Certification Act advocacy, as well as other advocacy items relating to the government influence from the HKSAR government. But for now, I think perhaps our, oh, I do see, right. So we'll continue to take questions if there are any questions, but I think now I do want to ask a more lighthearted question. So the report is finally out, and I know for Mason, it has been a lot of hard work. So I do want to know, in case any of our audience would be thinking of, working in a think tank from now on, or doing more research work, if you can share the kind of obstacles that you have faced in this sort of research report, and also the kind of steps you have taken to finally birth this baby out. Yeah, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I mean, if people are interested in working in policy research or policy advocacy, I would highly encourage it. I think it's a very rewarding line of work, and you certainly learn a lot of very interesting things. The things in the report, pretty much 99% of these things are not things I was really aware of at the time that we were writing this. I would say there's some bigger problems, like trying to find the scope of the report. We just kept finding more and more and more information, and trying to get that all into a sort of organized way. And obviously our team of research volunteers as well, many of whom are anonymous, helped a great deal with this. So I would like to thank these people very sincerely for helping reorganize a lot of the information here. But on a more mundane level, sometimes, we are looking at a lot of documents filed with the US government, and these are things that were, scanned by an intern and then faxed or something to the Department of Justice. And so, that's just one of those things, sitting there at 11 p.m. trying to zoom in on a document that's in 240p or something. So there's a lot of different little challenges, and I think it's been a very rewarding process. And it's obviously taken quite a while, but we have I think, hopefully helpful product out here with over 1,000 individually documented entries, interactions, and things like that. So I do encourage everyone to check this out, and we will be releasing a tutorial later this week on how to use the database. That'll be in English for journalists. So that's really the kind of general gist of how the report was done.
Yeah, thank you. So one funny anecdote that I remember was when you were doing all the researches, you were sending us screenshots of emails between staffers, or emails between, certain government officials, and they were saying something like LOL, or I forget whatever that was, but they were saying something funny in those emails. But then the fact that you have to comb through, all those emails and all those documentation just to get that one entry, that one data entry in the error table, I think that fascinates me. And in the end, you got more than 1,000 of them. And I think that is really, really, really great work, and definitely an asset to the movement and to the kind of advocacy work that we'll be doing. So for the session, if anyone wants to ask question, you would have to, I think, refresh the browser, as our colleague has reminded me, because I think the YouTube was on a different setting earlier. So for the chat box to work, you would have to refresh the browser. But before we take perhaps one or two questions, if there's any, I do want to call on some actions from our audience who are in the US. So if you're in the US, there are several things that you can do. So the first thing is to call your Congress members. Your Congress members are, they have to listen to your concerns. You're entitled to their time, and they are supposed to be here to serve you. So what you should tell them is, first, tell them about the HAE2 Certification Act, show them the report, and show them, the kind of worries you have about the presence of the HAE2 in the US. And secondly, tell them about the APEC meeting in November. Tell Congress members to band together to tell President Biden to never let John Lee into the United States. And thirdly, also tell our Congress members that you would like to see sanctions happening on national security judges and prosecutors in Hong Kong. So these are just different things that you are very encouraged to bring up with your Congress members or senators at all times. I think a lot of times community members may feel that, lawmakers are very far from them. But that is not the truth. The truth is when you are in the United States, when you are an American, you have the political right to voice your opinion. And the member of your district, they are responsible for your concerns and they are responsible for your demands. So you do have the political rights to demand them to do something. Well, we did not have that political rights in Hong Kong, and we do not have that political rights in Hong Kong right now. So when you have that in the United States, we better utilize it, maximize, all the chances we can get, and try to get legislations and actual actions passed and moving. So that's the kind of action call I have for our audience. And also, aside from the kind of advocacy work, please do support the local community in your area, support the Hong Kong community groups there. A lot of times these Hong Kong community groups try to, for example, host film screening because they want to show the authentic films made by Hong Kongers instead of only having their choice of HKDC or curated film festivals, which are just trying to perpetuate this rhetoric of Hong Kong being back in business, Hong Kong being this international finance center. So please support your local Hong Konger network and local Hong Kong communities, especially when they do try to host an event. It's always very challenging for them to gather enough resource to pull it off. So do show up and do show them support. And thirdly, please also support HKDC. If you want to, get know more about our updates, please follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and also consider donating to us to support our work. It's very essential for us to continue our work, and we hope that we can have more people join us as well. So for students, for people who might be eventually interested in getting into our line of work, perhaps under, even under the very threats that are posed to us, no matter where we are. Please look out for internship recruitment or positioning, hiring, recruitments as well. We are always in need of people. And even if it's not HKDC, the entire Hong Kong movement is always looking for people. So do join us, do not be shy, and hopefully you all enjoyed the session we have today. And for the full report, it's published on our website, which you can go to our website and take a look. There's a report and there's also the database. The report is a one-off thing trying to analyze and sort out the kind of network that's being used here. But the database is something we'll keep it updated annually. Once the public documents are available by law, then we'll for sure update all the entries and add to illustrate the kind of foreign influence work the Hong Kong government has been doing. So please give it a look. Feel free to use the report, to talk to your Congress members. It would be easier that way. And also please help amplify the work we're doing. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And we hope you have a good day, and we hope everyone stays safe out there, especially with the rampant transnational repression that is going on. But yeah, so see you all next time. Hope that you can join us again in our future live streams or other events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope you guys all have a great day.